After only the first month of cleaning the rolls, the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare removed 19,251 people who were deemed ineligible to be on the Medicaid program. That means that the Joint Finance Appropriations Committee over-budgeted the Medicaid program by an estimated $69 million for the 2024 fiscal year. Worse yet, we still have another 2 months of unwinding to go before the fiscal year even begins. The originally proposed budget for the governor called for the legislature to appropriate more than $4.7 billion in funding for the program. This made the Medicaid budget the largest ever considered in state history. Conservatives sought to cut more than $829 million in spending that would be saved after removing ineligible individuals from the rolls. However, pushback only yielded modest cuts in spending. Now, we are seeing the early signs that conservatives' calls for larger cuts were right after all. Medicaid spending has always been out of control, but was accelerated by the start of Medicaid expansion. This is an issue that the Idaho Freedom Foundation has been warning Idahoans about for some time now, but for years, lawmakers acknowledged the problem but failed to do anything about it. The projected costs of Medicaid expansion were only supposed to be $412 million per year. This request for upcoming fiscal year exceeded $4.7 billion, with more than $1 billion allocated to the expansion plan alone. These costs are due in part to stipulations connected with the national public health emergency for COVID. The federal government usually covers part of the cost to provide Medicaid services at the state level. During the pandemic, the federal government offered to cover a larger percentage of the cost to keep states afloat, as large numbers of people enrolled in welfare systems across the country. The catch was that states couldn't remove anyone from the rolls unless they moved out of the state, requested to be removed, or died. This was the program called Continuous Enrollment, or Medicaid Protection. Many who lost their jobs during the pandemic were suddenly eligible for Medicaid and enrolled. However, many eventually regained employment or private health coverage without disenrolling once they became ineligible. Now, the IDHW estimates that there are nearly 154,000 people on the rolls who may not be eligible for benefits. That is 37% of all Medicaid enrollees. This drives up the costs and harms the ability of the system to serve those who truly need it. After the passage of the federal omnibus budget bill earlier this year, states were finally allowed to clean their Medicaid rolls starting April 1st. However, the IDHW budget proposal did not reflect this. The key issue with the IDHW proposal is that the Idaho taxpayers would be funding participants that are not even on the rolls. The department estimated that only about 6,000 ineligibles would fall off the rolls by the end of the unwinding period. Conservatives and the Idaho Freedom Foundation pushed back on this proposal. At the time of the budget decisions, the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare estimated 150,000 people were ineligible. This is laughable that the department would claim that 144,000 people would remain eligible after nearly 3 years of not maintaining the rolls. Representative Josh Tanner proposed that the legislature assume that half the population under Medicaid protection would stay on the rolls, budgeting for the other half to be removed. This would have removed 75,000 ineligibles from the rolls and saved Idaho taxpayers more than $829 million in the 2024 fiscal year. Though this was a conservative estimate, establishment Republicans on JFAC were not in favor of cutting the Medicaid budget and sought to grant the agency the full $4.7 billion requested. Proponents of the agency's budget request, like Representative Rod Furness, argue that these are costs incurred from last year that needed to be paid now. This claim is patently false, as noted by many national experts on the issue, like those at the Foundation for Government Accountability. These large budget requests did not account for removing ineligible beneficiaries and were not popular on the House floor. Pushback from Representative Tanner and other conservatives during the debate on the bill generated enough traction to send the legislation back to JFAC so that cuts could be made to the program. Initially, it seemed that there would be a compromise bill that would assume 40,000 ineligibles fell off the rolls, saving just over $442 million. In the meantime, the IDHW reported that after only 2.5 weeks of the unwinding process, they already identified 13,000 people that would come off the rolls by April 1st. This new information was a beacon to liberal policymakers in both parties, like Representatives Britt Raybould and Colin Nash, to only cut these ineligibles rather than seeing it as a sign that the committee was over-budgeting beat their estimates. Ultimately, the budget was cut by $152 million, removing the 13,000 ineligible people. After only the first month of the unwinding process, it is apparent that this was a gross underestimation of how many people would need to be removed. More than 19,000 ineligibles fell off the rolls last Saturday, meaning that JFAC already over-budgeted Medicaid by an estimated $69 million. In closing, we see that the Medicaid program is evidence of an unbalanced budget and an imprudent use of taxpayer dollars. The program is failing as costs continue to exceed projections at an unsustainable rate. Though Idahoans should demand more of their senators and representatives on JFAC, we do see the power of conservative voices in the 2023 legislature. Taxpayers would have been on the hook for another $152 million in wasted funds if conservatives and the Idaho Freedom Foundation sat idly by, allowing the establishment to have their way with your money. We expect this fight to continue when the legislature reconvenes in 2024. For more episodes of Fiscal Fridays, legislative analyses, articles, expert insights, and more, please visit idahofreedom.org.